Good day to everyone. My name is Lucas, and today I'm joined by Jason Schweizer. Jason is a modern day wizard, in my view. He is a beautiful, magical person who is very curious and who is pursuing, I think, his curiosity, but also wisdom and love, I think. But I don't know him well enough to say that. So today we're getting to know him just a little bit better, and I'm really excited to talk to him because I always do love doing that. Please enjoy. Teaching has been good. Uh, sort of teaching. Like a lot of it is sitting in on classes and you're kind of there to answer questions. And then I usually teach at least one class a day, and now they're expanding that more and more. But yeah, it's super nice. Today I got
That's cool.
bracelets sold to me by little girls.
Sold?
Yeah,
What?
they're like
How, how much
entrepreneurs.
were they?
They're 10-year-old entrepreneurs. Well, they're €1 per thing. So yeah, I'll show them. They're like
Nice. That's cool.
I can't really. Yeah, they're like beads.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Smiley faces on them.
yeah, I just love those. Yeah, whenever I
That's
get
cool.
these, like I've had these before on my ankle, I won't take them off until they break, or if they like fall off,
Yeah,
I'll just wear it for a
yeah,
couple months. Uh, but no,
yeah.
it's super sweet. The relationship building is especially nice. You get to know a kid and they trust you more every time, and yeah, it's just
It's
really,
probably
really good.
good for you too, right?
Yeah, it's good
Yeah.
for just my development and my embodied existence that I've kind of been neglecting being at university for so long, and in my head and in podcast world. And I'm
Yeah.
like, for example, I'm just learning to read differently now and reading more stories, and I'm just in a different
Be-
world, I guess. Fantastic.
because of the kids? Oh,
Partially,
that
yeah.
too.
Partially, I think yes, because it's that I'm living such a more embodied experience in my work, and I'm teaching them about abstract things sometimes, that when I have time off, I guess I just gravitate more toward, yeah, I don't know, stories. I and
Yeah.
you see when kids are that age also, like I see practically now how much story influences them, and you kind of see the necessity and the importance of the ideas that we're kind of struggling with on here, because they influence them directly with the parents that they have and the worldviews that the parents have. Like they are directly passed down to their children, and so uh, it's super interesting to see how that works, and how the teachers deal with life questions. Uh, it's yeah,
Yeah.
it's just really cool. But I'm also
That's
blessed with
cool.
like the space I'm in. It's a very nice school, very open and yeah, friendly.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been at that point I think for a while now where I feel like I haven't been able to read anything technical or intellectual. I don't, maybe not intellectual might not be the right word in a long time. I've
Yeah,
just gravitated towards stories and yeah, I mean, and the stories I like are very deep and you can make them intellectual and you can talk about them and stuff, but uh, like all the like if I read something that sounds like a conversation that happens on here, like
yeah.
online, I'm just not interested. Like
No,
I'll listen to this stuff all the time. I'll listen to podcasts when I have time, which isn't hardly as much anymore. But if I pick up a book and I start reading through it and I'm like, this sounds like something I would listen to,
yeah,
I put it down.
yeah. I also really still have an appetite for Plato, which is technical in a sense, but it's just its own thing for me. It's like it's story at the same time as history, and at the same time as philosophy, at the same time as metaphysics and
Yeah.
mathematics, and just everything bundled into one thing. And then it's dialogues as well, which I love the dialogue. So it's kind of getting to
Yeah.
know people and then the minds are well, Plato is just. I started reading
That's
Plato at 19 because of Atlantis, and I read a couple of lines, and I was like, I need to read this thing. I need to read all of it because he seemed so smart and so interesting to listen to or to read. Yeah.
I've never read any actually.
Oh, I
What would
really
you
recommend
recommend?
it. I really recommend just, I mean,
Any
I'm
other?
not someone that's really like, oh, you need to start here and there, like with the Bible. I'm not like that. I think you should just read what you find interesting. So just open up Plato
Yeah,
Complete Works. There's free PDF everywhere. And you just start
yeah.
because
That's
they're all
all.
dialogues. So there are many, many books. And you just start in one.
That's cool. I didn't realize they were all dialogues. I knew he had done some of that, but that's cool.
Yeah, he writes. He doesn't ever write like he's Plato. He always writes Socrates and then another character and another character. And oh, it's so awesome. It's like you step a foot into the Athenian world, and it's fascinating. And
That's
they'll
so
make
cool.
references to Homer and to Egypt and to all these different peoples and the cultures of the time, and it's so alive. And then there's it's a lot of metaphysics as well, and magic being discussed. It's just Plato for me is the most exciting person to read ever. It just
Yeah,
I just never
that's
I will never
cool.
stop.
That's so cool.
It's
Is it kind of
awesome.
like Job a little bit in that it's the dialogue back and forth with Job, you
I don't know if
know?
that's comparable. It's very it's it's Socratic. So Socratic meaning that it's inquisitive.
Have you ever read the Bhagavad Gita?
Yeah, I think so.
What do you think of that? Is it any even similar to like what reading Plato or no?
I don't know because I read it when I was
It fell
18.
flat.
I just think
Mm.
that reading text like that, if you don't, well, first, if it doesn't speak to you right away, it's difficult. And,
Yeah.
or if it's not your culture, it's difficult. If it's not the tradition you're brought into, because there's a lot of information that you're just kind of, what do I do with this? How do I put this into context? It's for me similar to
Oh no.
reading
I think it
Egyptian.
froze that time.
Too bad.
Oh, you're back.
No, you're
You're
here.
back.
Yeah, it's similar to reading Egyptian texts for me that I'm like, I don't understand the symbolism really, and it's hard to get beyond that.
So what makes you like the Greek ones then? If you're, I mean, you're not weren't brought up in that culture.
Yeah,
You
I think
just
because the Western
kind of
culture is.
dove into it.
No, I've never been to Greece. I've been to
Oh,
Rome,
okay.
been to Italy a lot, so I've been to some of those places.
Okay. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so you have familiarity with it.
I guess so, and I think even just modern day Italians, they're and even Europeans as a whole, they're deeply rooted in the Greco-Roman culture as well as the Christian one. I think those two are kind of the foundation of the West. So they're much more close to us philosophically speaking, and the ideas are much easier to grasp because they're kind of close to who we are.
Okay.
I keep losing my wizard friend. I used to
Yeah.
do the before I had the Zoom subscription, I would have to back out of the meeting after 20 minutes.
Oh
You,
gosh.
you know that? You have to back out,
Yeah.
go back in. It's funny, the first like Mathieu Peugeot interview that I saw with Dan Shervin, who's this guy who's interviewed him a couple times, he had to back out as well. So they're like, hey, my Zoom is
Oh
expiring.
wow.
And it was such an interesting conversation. It was just funny they had to back out it every time.
So you said you're reading Fantasties. How's that going?
That's going very slowly, but I really like it. I'm trying to learn the language also of Fantasties. So I'm not used to reading fiction, and I need to work to make the world alive that I'm reading, and I really want that. Um, but yeah, I want to disappear in that book for once. Like I want to just carve out 3 hours or a whole day and just read and
Yeah.
kind of not stop. But now every time I read in very short bouts, let's say 20 minutes before bed or when I get to school and the kids are reading, I'll read a bit of Fantasties. That's what I've been doing. But it's kind of
Yeah.
difficult to get into in that way.
Yeah. It's good to read out in nature probably too. To get
Oh
like a
yeah,
break to do that.
for
But
sure. It's the way of the wizard. I saw this
yeah.
video of this guy who's like about the way of the wizard. There's these memes that I've been sending some of my friends about. being a wizard, and it's always just these two wizards in like nature. It's very specific aesthetic. If I can find it, I'll put in the effort to put it up on the screen right now for those listening. But there's this lore, these memes, and it's all about being a wizard. And it's like, I didn't see you at the club last week, and the other wizard says, I didn't see you by the creek and stuff like that. And it's just it's epic. But then I found this video of this guy who's all about the wizard philosophy, and he's like, what it means to be a wizard, and it just means like embrace curiosity and be out in nature and do martial arts. Like
What do martial arts?
that was a very random part of it. But yeah, he kind of implemented the wizard philosophy in his life. So I felt like he kind of extrapolated the memes that he saw about this wizard type of lore that if you're
Yeah.
not familiar with, it's kind of hard to grasp. But once you've seen a couple, you get it. And then made a whole life philosophy about it. So I sent him an email to see if he wanted to come on talk. So we'll see.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it'd be really funny because
I wonder if he can actually like do some actual magic or
no, for sure
something.
not. Well, he was
Yeah.
saying that magic, he gave a funny idea about magic, that creativity is magic. And so that's like an ancient idea.
See, I think that's probably mostly true. And like the whole way of the wizard thing, probably mostly true being in I guess nature and stuff because I feel like you if you're just kind of in that or doing these practices or in that space long enough, your mind would start to open up where you could see things differently. But
Yeah.
it's just I don't know when it gets reduced to only that, I'm like, oh, but I kind of still want like the wands and the spells and like what we actually think about wizards. Like I
Yeah,
actually want all the crazy stuff too.
for sure. And
So
that's what I love about Plato. For me, Plato re-enchants me when I read it because they speak about divination and stuff like that, where it was such a
yeah,
part of everyday life there in the ancient world. It's just feels alive.
yeah,
And my wife just lent me out a book about ancient Babylonia, and it's centered around this character who's inside of I don't know if it's the city Babylon, but it's in that area, and it kind of brings it all to life. And you have priests and priestesses, and you have people predicting the future or kind of
that's
prophesizing,
cool.
and it's cool.
Yeah,
It's nice to read a fiction in that world because it really enchants it, and it's an enchanted world for
yeah,
sure. Like the ancient world is super magical in a way that ours isn't.
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, for real. Yeah, I went through the Epic of Gilgamesh not too long ago, and that
Yeah,
was really good. I really enjoyed that. And that was very enchanted. I felt like it's enchanted almost in a different way too, though. There's like a weird, I don't know how to describe it other than some of it just feels lofty or like up there, you know? And then
yeah,
the other stuff feels like I don't know, there's like some of the divination aspects feels very like earthy and kind of a lower frequency. I don't know how to describe it. But Gilgamesh felt very, I think, a lot more lofty to me with the like maybe more archetypal. I don't really know what it
yeah.
was, but yeah,
Yeah, I also find that one difficult to read for similar reasons with the Bhagavad Gita.
yeah,
It's just it's in a language that's not spoken anymore, and it's translated, and yeah, interpreted.
yeah.
Difficult.
I tried the Bhagavad Gita and I kind of found it dull. There's
Yeah.
this so I don't know. Do you know Jedediah Pascal? I don't know how you say his last name. He's sometimes over on Grail Country. He'll pop up, but not super often.
Does he have a YouTube channel?
Yeah, he's got his own YouTube channel, but he really, really loves the Bhagavad Gita, and he'll reference that a lot. And he'll talk a lot about like Revelation or more apocalyptic themed stuff out of the Bible. But he's super fun to talk to and a great guy. But like I've tried the Bhagavad Gita, and like it just the way it resonates with him and Cal, like our friend Cal, Mr. Cool Man. Um,
Oh man.
they both could probably just eat it up. And Cal grew up Hare Krishna, so that's probably why some of it. But
No.
every time I've tried, it just I don't know. I remember trying it, and I just thought it was extremely dull. And then I tried the Mahabharata, and I kept trying to read it, and I was a little more interested in that because the Mahabharata. I mean, you're familiar, right? It's like
Yeah.
the the bigger version. Yeah, and Bhagavad Gita's in the middle of it. But and that I thought was more interesting. It didn't really hook me until like the beginning of this year. For some reason, I just started listening to it on audio and was way more interested. But I still don't even know what to think of it. It's just like I'd listened to the whole Mahabharata, excluding the Bhagavad Gita. I didn't like it, like cut that part out of the middle for some reason. And I was talking to Cal about it afterward, and I'm like, some of this is just like it's just weird. It feels like very, very strange storytelling to me, and I'm not sure what to make of it with such an ancient story.
I like the Upanishads. I don't know if you're familiar with those. They're a bit more mystical. They're
No,
cool. They're cool. It's like you have the Vedas, which are foundational, which
yeah,
are extreme. They're super long, and there's a lot about just how to perform sacrifices, which is just difficult to read. It's just not very interesting. And I'm not meaning to reduce it. I'm just saying it's a difficult
yeah,
text to get through. Like they're proper difficult. And Upanishads is much more mystical. It's a bit
yeah,
more recent, still a couple thousand years old, I think, but it's really cool. It's like it's a bit like reading Meister Eckhart or something. It's like a mystical text, but but
yeah,
sometimes the text speaks to you and you have to follow that, and sometimes it doesn't, and that's okay. And you focus on something else.
yeah,
I've become very selective with what I read, and I really try to be persuaded by a text. And sometimes that just doesn't happen, and I'm like, okay, there's so much to read. I want to focus on what's really grabbing me because I think there's a signal in there that I need to follow. So that's why I'm kind of
yeah,
just
yeah,
reading
and
Plato
even
forever.
kind of, yeah, yeah, that's good. I was the same way with Fantasties. I still kind of am. I will pick that. I could probably pick that book up anytime and just read it, and then. But it's weird. It's kind of the same thing. Like if I suggest that book to someone else and it's not grabbing them, like I feel like it would just it's just kind of absurdity. If they're
Yeah,
not hooked by it, it's like I feel like it would just be excruciating to read if you're not into it.
yeah.
But it definitely, um, like I think C.S. Lewis probably said it best when he said when he read that book, it baptized his imagination, and
Oh
so
wow.
uh, yeah, I think that book has a way of doing that. Like you were talking about, like kind of getting into that space and letting yourself be there. Um, I just like I think there's this one chapter and he's talking about this little kid that he sees and he says this kid is like has two tools with him and one of them lets him see the same thing everywhere or something like that. And then I can't remember what the other tool does. And then he says he looks at the kid and the kid has like these glowing rays of sunshine coming from behind his head. And then he says his have you gotten to the part about his shadow yet in the
Yeah,
book?
yeah.
Okay, yeah. And his shadow touches the kid or passes before the kid, then he says all of a sudden it's just the kid with the straw hat. And so that was
Ah,
the sun behind him. So it's like his imagination was observing the kid
yeah,
and like it and everything was not as clearly defined and didn't have to be as clearly defined until his shadow touched it. And then all of a sudden, the kid was just reduced to he wasn't a fairy child anymore. He was just some kid with a straw hat on. And I think the one tool is a kaleidoscope, and his other tool is like a magnifying glass or something like that.
yeah.
But yeah,
That's an interesting idea. Have you seen My Neighbor Totoro?
what is no? I don't know what that is.
Have you watched Miyazaki movies?
Not very many. No, I
Ah,
should.
yeah, you should watch.
Everybody's talked so highly about him, but
Yeah,
I saw Spirited Away when I was like I don't know, maybe 13, 14.
let me see.
It's been like 20 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a while. I
But
would recommend rewatching, but we're watching My Neighbor Totoro yesterday, and basically the story is there's a father, two daughters, and a mother who's sick, who's in the hospital, and they just move into this new house um, in the Japanese countryside, and they get into the house, and there's like these little black little creatures. They're like soot type of creatures, and the little girls they see the creatures, and there's this old lady that comes by and she tells the girls that they're young enough to see them, or there's like they still have the ability to see them, and she said that the Sid Gremlins, they're called, I think, the Sid Gremlins, they're trying to evaluate them to see if they're good people, and if that's true, then they'll move away. Anyway, this whole environment is like quite enchanted, especially for the little girls. So we're seeing from kind of their perspective. And the youngest, she goes and sees these creatures, and she's super curious, and she follows them into the woods, and she ends up at this really old tree, and she finds this creature called Totoro, and she falls asleep on his belly, and he's like this kind of, I don't know, like a bear, very funny type of creature, really, really clumsy, really funny creature. And she's just like super fearless. She seems to be like 3 years old, and she doesn't care. She just completely follows her curiosity into the woods. And um, then the other girl and the dad find her there, and she's no longer on his belly. She's just like sleeping on the grass. And you could read that cynically as like she's all seeing that in her imagination, and um, she dreamt that up, and now she's just where she actually was all that time. But then the dad says, as they enter the tree where there used to be an opening when she was there, she's like, "Oh, the tree opening is closed now, so they probably don't want us to see them right now." And then the other girl's like, "Oh, Dad, am I gonna see Totoro as well and all the creatures?" And she's like, "Yeah, if you're lucky, you'll probably see them." And it's just this idea that the world can open up to you, and it can close back down as well, what you described with the shadow.
Yeah,
And I think that explanation of magic and an enchanted world kind of really helps me make sense of things a lot more in our previous conversations as well. So watching this movie is kind of helping me. Yeah.
that's great. Yeah, I'll have to watch that one. I know the cover you're talking about. I know I've seen the cover of that
Yeah.
one, but yeah. Yeah, it reminds me that even reminds me of like the Fantasties chapter. There's a I don't know which book how far into it are you?
I'm
Like
into 60 or 70 pages or so.
oh, okay. I don't know where that would be.
It's a
Did he go is he at the did he get to a house with did you get to the house of yeah, you if he got the shadow, he went to the house of the ogre, right?
Yeah, I think he just
Yeah,
arrived
so
to a new spot, which is very
okay.
specific. And
Gotcha.
his shadow, he's in a spot. I think it may be a palace. And he was just saying in the
Yeah.
book that his shadow hasn't bothered him for a while, but he knows he's kind of lingering somewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
Something like
Okay.
that.
Yeah, before he gets his shadow, I know he goes into this house and there's like a mom and a girl who believe in like fairyland and the
Yeah,
dad doesn't and stuff. And then yeah.
yeah,
And the dad loves the part where he says like he looks over at the girl and then he says I think she's just sitting there reading a book and then he says, I believed in fairyland again. And it's like where it just seeing that glimpse of the child makes him believe again. But then I think it was after that when his shadow, I think when it touches the kid, like the part I just mentioned, and he sees the kid with the straw hat, he says his shadow starts to become, he starts to revel in some sort of vain uh, glorification of his shadow or something like that. And it's telling him things. It basically says, like, if, uh, if the world is less magical, that's what, if the world is just reduced to kind of like just this material is all it is. He's like, I'll know where I am. Like at least I'm not
yeah,
crazy or not like, out there seeing Totoro or whatever. It's like at least I know what's real. Yeah. And then that part, like, and then I think like right after that, he says like, he was starting to get into that mode with his shadow, but then his shadow he got suspicious of it again because his shadow kind of betrayed his trust when he breaks that girl's globe. And that part gets me every time I read it. When he touches her globe and it shatters, and she's like, my globe, you've broken my globe."
yeah,
And it's just like she just runs away yelling that, and he's just kind of like haunted
yeah,
by her voice saying that. But
yeah.
yeah, I don't know that entire book though. That's all about. I mean, it's about so many things, but it's about the imagination. It's about probably the imagination, kind of in the sense that even probably more so like I guess maybe Jonathan Peugeot and his brother would talk about it, where it's very related to the feminine.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think that's that whole play back and forth throughout that entire book is super fascinating. Like how did how it almost feels like a I don't want to say coming of age book, but it almost feels more directed towards boys, I guess. Yeah. So, but it's
Also
yeah.
because
I
it,
think I've said all this before,
I'm not
but
sure. I don't know if I've heard it before, but it's interesting, and I
oh,
think it
okay.
has something to do with also. I mean, the male perspective is often cynical, or at least there's a stage of one's life where you get more cynical and sarcastic, and materialism is much more prevalent among men, let's say. And so this shadow idea is
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's cool. And I feel like the fairy world is very feminine and it's ruled by the feminine in many ways. I don't know. Tell me what you think about this. I was listening to a Weird Studies podcast about Plato and the Timaeus. It was really interesting.
It's
Anyway,
the best podcast
it's the
ever.
best. It's the best. And they were saying that in Plato it says that people turn to divination when things are not so good for them in their lives. And the accomplished philosopher doesn't really need to enter into magic spells. And I don't know. Do you think that you should, if you're of sane mind, not even kind of pay attention to magic and divination, or you know magic as a whole, like the enchantment and stuff? Because I feel very pulled toward it, especially when I'm doing well. Almost like I feel like I when my base needs
Yeah.
are met, that's when I want more. That's when I want to see things. That's when I want to go in the forest and just see fairies and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Yeah, I just smiled because you're asking the question. Like, I feel like I've been not wanting to give because have this way. Like, I have a reservation of like not of like I don't really want to tell people go practice magic or go practice divination or anything like that because I'm like I think it's extremely destructive, especially in the wrong context,
Yeah.
probably, or at least maybe if you're throwing all your if you're putting like betting everything on like this one divinational spell, but to ignore it seems foolish to me because it almost seems like it's uh yeah, it almost kind of seems like a weirdly I don't want to say arrogance, but it's almost like a blind arrogance in some ways of kind of ignoring what because well my context for divination at least now is basically there's a conversation I had with I think his name's Christopher. Goes by Fleetwood or something. But he said when I asked him what divination he said it's basically you're asking everything that's not you what the will is. So it's like you have magic, which is like you imposing your will upon the world. So you can do a magic spell, which is like, I want this, I'm gonna impose my will. And divination is kind of just reading the cards. It's like, what is
Oh,
the world telling me? What is everything else around me that's not me
yeah.
saying to me? So it's kind of like you're drawing straws, you're flipping cards, um, yeah, I guess maybe astrology falls into that a little bit too.
Hmm.
Um, and then and so you're kind of so to ignore that what everything else around you is kind of saying just almost kind of seems foolish to me,
Yeah.
but then at the same time it's like I don't know I'm it's hard for me to say oh yeah go start practicing the tarot or something but I don't know
Yeah.
but but then it's like, well, if the tarot cards had a bunch of Christian saints on them, I'm like, okay, well then is it okay? Because
Yeah.
now it's like I'm like, I don't know. It'd probably at least be fun. People would think it'd be fun. Oh, look, there's Saint Christopher. He popped up right now. So maybe I mean people have that though. Like people really do if they're paying attention, like especially intuitive people, they'll notice like they feel like a certain saint is kind of pulling
Yes.
them or talking to them
Yeah.
or like more prevalent in their life. So it's kind of it, to me it's kind of it's at least very similar. I don't know that it's the same thing, but it's very similar. So yeah, I would say to ignore that seems I would say it seems kind of foolish.
Yeah. There's a sense to
But
which it's all kind of madness, the dreams, the visions, the experiences. It can be interpreted as all madness, but then there's this more a truer idea, which is that there's definitely things to interpret there. Like there's definitely ways in which all of those seemingly mad images are trying to tell you something. But to pay attention to them all day,
Yeah,
every day, that seems foolish. But to ignore them seems foolish too. So I think there's some path to
yeah,
walk in the middle where,
yeah.
you're taking.
Definitely. Yeah, like I mean, I grew up really Protestant Christianity, and so they would say stuff like that where I mean they're very charismatic, so it feels very magical and mystical and everything. But they would say like you shouldn't I remember them saying you shouldn't pray to God and be like, God, I'll give if you're trying to tell me such and such, like I'll give $1,000 here if you just like the next car that goes by is red. Because they're like they would say probably something like, "Oh, the devil could make that car red or something," which like is kind of absurd. But I'm like, I don't know. But then at the same time, I'm like, I don't know how to take those things because it's like it does seem silly or madness. But then at the same time, it's like, well, what if you actually listened to it and followed it through, and it's like something terrible happened to you? It's like I, I mean, I don't know. You're still somewhere else in life, I guess. I don't. It's all. I don't know. I have
Well,
no idea. But
tell me.
I could see, I guess that's what I mean. I could see the danger of it though. If you're constantly, like you said, constantly doing that, like, oh, if this next card's a king, then I'll do this. If this, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So I asked my grandpa about dreams, what they mean. And he always thought that I asked too many questions, which is funny. And he said that he was taught that dreams are, I don't know what the English word is. Bedrog is like, bedrog is illusion. Like they're illusions. You should ignore them. But then at the same time, so he's a devout Christian. He was a devout Christian.
yeah,
And, when angels appear, they appear in dreams. So why are you telling me that they're illusions? Like, or Peugeot is like,
yeah,
you should be careful with dreams. They can be really dangerous and this and that. He says stuff like that, or you should ignore them in a way. But then what is all this stuff? Like, should I? I shouldn't turn my back to all of it
yeah,
for sure. I do feel that my sleepy self, when I'm in early morning, I have this idea like, oh, this is so meaningful and it means everything. And I can see all the patterns kind of, but I haven't put words to it. And then my rational mind wakes up at 9 a.m. and it's like, what are you talking about? That makes no sense. And then I tell my wife the dream and it kind of makes no sense. And I tried to make some sense of it, but it's often much more difficult afterward. Like I have to really be very close to the dream, wake up, write it down, figure it out. Then
yeah,
something can pop up. But yeah,
yeah. That's crazy. Do you write down most of your dreams or no?
no, not at all. I did that for a year or so, and then I just kind of it took a lot of time. Like when I wake up,
Yeah,
I have very
yeah,
few minutes to get to work, and I don't have time to write down my dreams. Yeah,
yeah. I did that for probably about the same time, and I would just talk into my phone,
yeah, I did that too.
talk to text, but then yeah, I remember it seemed like I don't know if it was like a common like just like the majority of the time, but I remember more like quite often I feel like the dream zone I would end up going back and being like, what is this? This makes no sense.
Yeah,
But then the other dreams that almost seemed I remember I would wake up and think, I don't need to write this down. At this point I just kind of wait for one to just really stick, where you just have that dream and you're like, it just kind of like haunts you, or it just, I don't know, you kind of feel it or something on the inside and you
yeah,
carry it with you. And I have very, very few of those. I often don't remember my dreams either anymore, but
yeah. I remember too many, and I will say about dreams grabbing you. I found that some of the dreams that I really ignored that were very mundane and I wrote them down, I look back on, and the meaning is just completely clear. But at the time, it just didn't make any sense. So there's something
yeah,
to waiting for 2 years and looking back at it and just not even remembering the dream and then understanding. I think there's something.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. To your grandfather though, I think I wonder if I was brought up with the same uh teaching or if my parents had the same thought or if our churches did. I don't really know because maybe there was just always the skepticism around dreams. because it wasn't until I started reading the Bible like a few years ago, um, where I was like, wait, I should actually start paying attention to these because it seems like this is one of the major ways that God talks to people. Like Joseph, like you said in
Yeah,
the Old Testament, like you
yeah,
said, the angels in the New Testament are always showing up in dreams, and yeah,
yeah.
like people are
Maybe.
constantly having dreams. Yeah,
But I think that,
yeah.
being in a sleep state, it just makes you very vulnerable for spirits. And there's this thing in that book that I'm reading about ancient Babylonia where they say it was an ancient belief that the bad spirits far outnumbered the good ones. And so kind of the way I'm seeing a lot of Christians deal with spirit world and the weird is to kind of play it safe and
I
say,
think it, bro.
gosh, to say
Sorry, you said.
let's ignore a lot of the spiritual
Hmm.
as like a safety thing, as to
Oh, gotcha.
protect us from things, because there are so many bad spirits out there as well trying to contact you. And how do you distinguish them, especially when you're not very,
Yeah.
learned in that regard? And I don't know if I have good discernment about those things either. So,
Do you know how you feel about that or no?
about what?
Do you think that's probably accurate or
The bad spirits, I
that there
think.
being more evil spirits and good spirits in the world? Yeah.
Um, I don't know, but quantity is not more important than quality. I do know that. So I
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
trust
Yeah.
God.
I almost feel like there's sorry. Yeah, that's
Go
good.
ahead.
Yeah. Just trust God. No, I was gonna say like I feel like they're probably yeah. I don't even know really where to start with all that. Um I feel like there probably are just, I don't know, countless many spirits in the world, but it's hard for me to categorize them as evil or good. Because even, I think that even gets into like some of the astrology stuff where people will, or like the Greek gods or all that. And I don't really feel like any of them are evil. They're just kind of, they are what they are. And then they can become evil if they're not, in their proper place or something
Yes.
like that. I
Yes,
don't really
actually.
know. So I kind of feel that way about all spirits. Like even talking about like fairies and stuff, it's like I feel like if you went into into the woods and you like were just like completely just throwing garbage around or something, it's like I I don't know. I like yeah, I've not I feel like there is everything exists relationally, so I feel like it's
Yeah.
the idea of karma has some validity to it. I think that in that aspect, it's like you can't really escape karma. You can't escape um, things coming back around. But I think the way that that is kind of broken is through forgiveness. But then at the same time, forgiveness has this weird element to it where like it kind of requires something of you too. Like it has a recompense. It requires a reconciliation, I think. Like if you're to forgive, um, it's not one of those like because people will kind of forgive in a weird embittered way where they're just like oh I forgive them or something
Yeah.
which sometimes you can't sometimes you can't reconcile everything because takes two parties, but that's what I mean where forgiveness is like it yeah it requires the balancing of the scales. Like karma is, I think, all about like the scales being balanced, like tit for tat, there's eye for eye, tooth for tooth. But
Yeah.
then forgiveness is like the only thing that actually balances the scales because
That's
um, it actually requires that there be a recompense and things be reconciled. And um, but that's the thing too. Like if you're forgiven all your sins and you're not a forgiving person, then I think it's not gonna go well for you. That's what I mean. Where there is like this weird element of like of judgment within it where like it requires you
yeah.
to be it requires you to love or something like that. Yeah. So
Yeah, I like that.
but
That's
that's that's what I mean. I feel like that was
derailment.
a derailment from all the evil spirits.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's
But
get
that
back.
I mean maybe it's not too much though. because maybe like in that proper context, that's where all the other spirits are good, and maybe that's why I don't I don't really see all the other spirits as evil. Like I think there's so that's even with like all the Hindu gods too. It's
Yeah.
like you have all these crazy looking gods that are just like Kali is you could so easily just say she's a demon and throw her out.
Yeah.
And I don't really know how to justify Kali, but at the same time I'm like I know there's something to it
Yeah.
because it's just like that she's the side of the feminine that is like because you have the masculine side that does that people can kind of justify at least in certain areas sometimes with um yeah like this violent force or something like that or but Kali is like from what I understand it's just kind of like a mother's rage
Mm.
for her children
Mm.
but then she goes too far and she's like killing kind of in her bloodlust she ends up like kind of killing her own children and stuff. So it's like there's even in the story, it's like there's this bad aspect to it. But the spirit that's there is like I feel like there's to throw out that that aspect of the divine mother of being like that yeah that weird I don't know what to categorize it
It's
as maybe
reductionist
yeah
as well.
raid
Yeah.
yeah yeah.
You're
So I
reducing.
feel like it could be in yeah, it could be an evil spirit, but it's like if it doesn't go too far, if it's not worshipped, uh, then I think it's still there because it has that story has a zeal to me. Like and there is a zeal in the Bible all the time. And it's like what I think that's what a lot of people struggle with too, though. Like what do you do with zeal and when is it appropriate and when can you do all that? And so like but to throw it out just seems yeah like you said reductionist and almost I don't know probably I think not good in my opinion but
I like this idea though that you're proposing, or at least that we've been discussing, of letting go of the idea of good and evil spirits. And it's really what I feel when I watch Miyazaki movies as well. I don't feel that it's a good and evil paradigm at all. It's different.
yeah
It's something else. And maybe I need to put on different glasses for that. And I really think that there's some insights there that I haven't touched upon before because I'm so in this frame. But yeah,
yeah
that's
well there's even getting back to dreams I remember like for a long time even talking to people about dreams it was like if you had a bad dream or a nightmare it's kind of like oh it's the devil you know he's trying to
yeah,
scare you
yeah,
but like in Genesis, one I think it's one of the first dreams that gets mentioned. It's Abraham has a dream, and it says he's like terrified in his dream
yes,
because he sees all this. Yeah, and so that made me change my mind, and I was like, I should start looking at my nightmares too because it's probably just like you're in a realm of images at that point. I mean, maybe some people dream in words more too, but it's like even if you're in that realm, it's like that's how things are going to communicate. And so if something looks terrifying, it's supposed to look terrifying and it's supposed to mean something. And so I had this one dream, and it was horrific. Like I just remember it was kind of like weirdly had this weird like Scrooge theme to it. Like I woke up and there were three spirits at the foot of my bed, and all of them were absolutely terrifying. But I just remember like just sitting with it afterwards instead of like just being like, oh, they're all demons, you know. It was like, oh no, they're here and they were communicating something.
yeah,
And um and then like the rest of that year it felt like I was weirdly walking through this process where it was like having to whatever they were communicating, I was like having to go through almost. But yeah. So yeah, like you said, to just kind of yeah, that does feel reductionist to me to just kind of take everything into the and white, good and evil type thing. But
yeah.
even that too, I'm like, there's probably some utility for that at some point. I don't want to. I don't know.
No, I think that's good. I think that's also safer in a sense, the good and evil, but I think
Yeah,
in order to learn, you have to open yourself up, and you can't open yourself up when you categorize something as bad. And
yeah,
I think that sometimes, often, treasure is where you least want to look, and so don't ignore your nightmares. That's an indication that you need to look somewhere.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I definitely think
yeah.
that.
I think. I mean, people I think have discovered that with certain nightmares too that just are reoccurring,
Current, yeah.
like the like teeth falling out or something like that.
Yeah,
They're like,
yeah.
oh, this is related to that, and so yeah, I think like you said, there's definitely a lot there. Have you? I got a question for you if it's not going to glitch up. Um, don't want to jinx it. What do you think of the Vervaeke thing with the Hermes and all that?
Oh yeah, that's cool. I was really surprised with how he encounters him because I was just imagining him kind of doing a young active imagination practice and he's just in a chair. But he said he was through writing, which
Oh,
I was really surprised by. So he writes, I think, I believe I'm getting this right, in a dialogue format. And Hermes just shows up through his pen.
that's
So
amazing.
that's super interesting to me because I'm like, did Plato do some of that, or could I do some of that? So then I start playing around with it
Yeah,
myself, asking myself questions, or like writing in question, um, and it helps for me. But I'm still too. I'm not as much in a sleepy state or a translucent
yeah,
or feminine state enough to really get insights out of it that I don't already understand. So I'd like to play around with that more, but I find it super interesting.
that
Yeah.
is really interesting. Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that a lot. I think you probably have to be really humble to do that and really honest, humble
Yes.
and honest,
Yes.
because it's
But I like it
yeah,
though. I think it's also especially cool that it's an existing god or an existing
yeah,
mythological figure. So then that
yeah,
means
yeah,
there's some degree to which he can communicate with other people about it and try to get a better understanding why Hermes specifically. That's such an interesting thing.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I know it's a kind of controversial with a lot of people because they're like they think he's just talking to a demon or something, but I don't get that
yeah.
vibe at all. I think
Yeah.
it's like he might not be talking to like the god of all gods or anything, but it's like I would imagine, especially if he's doing it in writing form, and just from the little bit I've listened to him, he seems to be just an extremely honest and humble person, and I think
Yeah.
you'd have to do that because you if you're going to write something like he could easily let his own mind get involved and contaminate what Hermes is saying, or be like, oh, I want Hermes to say this. But like, because I've had that in writing too, where I remember writing a dialogue and I remember writing something and almost feeling like I had sinned because I
Yeah.
was like, this character wouldn't say this. And I had to just pause and like sit there a while. And then I was like, no, they would say this. They would obviously say this. And it was weird because it was kind of obvious, like
Yeah.
what they would say. And it was not what I had written. And so I had to go change it. And it wasn't like I wanted them to say something else either. It was just like I think I just wrote what I wrote and then had to I don't know, go back.
Yeah, but that shows you that there's a path to follow with these things. There's a little thread that you can pull onto where, whether it's a
Hmm.
character or it's someone that you're actually communicating with, let's say Vervaeke type of entity that he's interacting with that's not exactly objective or subjective, but it has
Yeah,
something of
yeah.
its own, an agency, a place that it wants to go to, an insight that it wants you to uncover for him. And so for me, it's exciting. It's opening up a portal because I want to interact with the ancient world. That's why I study Egyptology. I wanted to understand the ancients and the ancient worldview, and I feel I'm getting closer and closer to it. And Vervaeke
That's
could
super
could
cool.
help me with that. Uh,
Well, yeah, I mean, like if you were writing and the Greek gods were talking, like they have personalities, and so I think if you're honestly writing, you would say, like, if you're writing for Ares or something, it's like
yeah,
the god of war. Like he would probably say certain things and wouldn't say other things because he's kind of got a spirit, and that spirit has a personality to it.
yeah,
So even Aphrodite, it's like that's why I was so fascinated when I read Epic of Gilgamesh and Ishtar, which I think is the same as Aphrodite, or at least similar. Like when she started trying to talk to Gilgamesh, and I was like, and just they had this weird little dialogue for a moment, and I was like, this seems just so accurate to that spirit and what that spirit would say and do. And then that also opened up a ton of stuff in Fantasties for me too, like the Maiden of the Alder Tree. I'm like, that's just an Ishtar. That's an Ashtoreth. Like in the Ashtoreths in the Bible, it's like it's all the same like category. It's just like I don't want to say fractal. It's just like like
yeah.
a type. I guess a type of Ishtar or something. Or
Yes.
yeah.
Oh,
And it's
that's
a type of
exciting.
that seductive feminine spirit that like embodies in different areas in the world. And so I think Hermes would be the same way, but I'm not. Hermes is always one of the ones that I think intrigued me the most, but I'm less familiar with. But probably the reason I'm less familiar with is because I don't think he lets you kind of. I would imagine that type of messenger spirit. I think he's kind of a little bit of a trickster spirit too,
Yeah.
I've heard. I don't know. But I don't think he would let, I don't think you'd be really allowed to have a reductionist viewpoint on him as much, where you can counter it. Like Ares, it's like, oh, he's the god of war. It's like Hermes, he's the messenger god, but he's also kind of like a lot more fluid or something.
Yeah.
So I think I'm just, yeah.
I mean, anyone with wings on his feet should be taken like with a grain of salt. You gotta like warm up to him, and and uh,
Yeah.
and take it slow. Make sure that he's speaking truth, because he'll just it's funny. He shows up in Black Panther 2 or 3 or whatever. The
He
main
does.
villain is like a Hermes character. He's got wings on his feet, and he's like the king of Atlantis.
Oh,
It's super interesting. Like, I think
whoa.
with that movie, they were like, let's take all the things that are the most fun and mysterious. So he comes from a Mayan mother in like a couple hundred years ago, and then the Mayans, or I don't know if it's the Mayans, you can imagine South American culture at the time, they flee into the water and they eat this herb or something like that, and he ends up going into the water and making this empire, and this and it's got these Hermes feet. And I find it
That's
so
crazy.
funny how Hollywood deals with you know
Yeah.
Greek mythology and all these, just groups it all together and kind of tries to sell it somehow. Um, but all that said, speaking about this and starting from Hermes, it's given me a lot of creative inspiration. I'm thinking of kind of exploring Egypt in that way of, um, yeah, well, getting into that world, imagining a character in that world, trying to see if I can imagine, or let's say correspond and interact with those gods, and to see how they did that. Uh, I don't know. I think there could be something in there for me to learn. So that's given me
Yeah.
some inspiration for sure.
That's super cool, man. Yeah. That's so crazy. I didn't know he was writing with that. That's fun.
Yeah,
That's
I
really
believe
cool.
so. He did a PVK. He did with PVK. He spoke about it, and I think that's what he mentioned there or in another talk. I'm not sure.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, man.
I
Do you
think we
have
should.
a favorite oh,
Yeah.
sorry,
No,
what
go
were you
ahead.
saying?
No, you go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna ask if you were drawn to any of those like just had a weird kind of pull towards anything like that. It doesn't have to be a weird. I feel like I'm gonna get in trouble. It doesn't have to be a weird pagan god or deity or anything. Like there's saints too. Like you can
Yeah,
pick a
if
saint
there's
if
one
you
that
want,
pulls
but
me.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that interests you.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I wrote my thesis about an Egyptian god. That's an interesting one for sure. That's like Amun. I don't know if you know Amun.
That sounds a little familiar.
Yeah, he's like the main god in the last stretch of the Egyptian empire, and he started to become kind of king of kings in terms of gods. And in the papyrus scroll that I studied, he was understood to be the god. But it's if you look at his name etymologically, it's the verb iman, which means to be hidden or to hide or something like that. So there's a hiddenness to him. There's a degree to which he doesn't have a body, and most other gods, they are represented with certain bodies and certain very definite
Wow,
characteristics, and so he seems to have been chosen because he's indefinite, because he's uh yeah,
the
more
god who can't be
elusive,
named.
more, yeah, can't be named. That's another aspect to it, and it's in that scroll even, that it's like anyone who tries to name him, dies a terrible death or something like that. It's super cool. Yeah,
Dang.
yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's super fascinating
Yeah.
that they would even taking that less I don't know, mystically and more like psychologically, I would think you would kind of arrive at that conclusion. Like yeah, like the in the book of Acts when Paul is walking around all the Greek gods, and then he sees the altar of the god who can't be named. That's kind of how it seems. And the
Yeah,
whole idea of the name of can't say God's name. That would make sense. Yeah, that's
yeah,
super cool. Wow.
yeah. Man, I have to wrap up though. I'm really, I hate
Yeah.
this, but at least we didn't glitch
No.
one last time. But let's continue this conversation later on, and then we'll ask about
Okay.
your favorite pagan demon.
All right. I'll
We'll
try to
do
have
it
one.
like
I'll
that.
try to have a
No,
few
but
ready for
thank
that.
you for your patience here, and sorry about my connection. And yeah, it's always a joy to speak to you. So we'll pick it up soon.
Yeah.
I'll keep texting
It's
you.
great, man. Thanks for doing this.
All right,
All
thank you
right.
for your
See
time,
ya.
sir. See you.
Oh, do I have to end it? I'm the host.
Oh, you're the
Maybe I
host.
can.
I'll capsize you.
No, you can
I'll
end
clue you. All right. See you, Jason.
it.
Bye bye.
See you, man.